This is the Loaded Radio Podcast.
Okay, hey, how you doing? It is Scott Penfold back with you here for another edition of the Loaded Radio Podcast. We've been off for a while, and reason being is that we've got a lot of changes happening with the podcast, and this is going to actually be the last Loaded Radio Podcast that is set up this sort of way. Okay, you'll see what I mean in the days ahead, but yes, thank you for being so patient, and the podcast will continue commencing next week, an all-new Loaded Radio Podcast, which is definitely going to be cool. Can't wait for you to check it out. But on the show today, I've got a couple of cool guests, man. First off, going to be talking with Alex Jones. He's the vocalist for UNDEATH, some great death thrash metal that you just gotta love, man. Out there on the road right now in support of their latest album, It's Time to Rise from the Grave. And those guys doing a whole whack of North American dates. So we'll be talking with Alex, and as well going to be talking to Reed Alton. And he is the frontman for the band OSYRON, and they have the new album Momentous out. Those guys, just a killer Canadian metal band who are just ripping it up when it comes to Spotify, when it comes to just streaming online. It's just a massive influx of new fans, it looks like, for this band, and you want to find out why, and we'll stick around because we'll be talking with Reed a little bit later on, okay? But as I was mentioning, first off, though, we're going to be talking with this guy here. He is the vocalist for the band UNDEATH, and they are currently out there on the road in support of their latest album, It's Time to Rise from the Grave, which dropped back in April. He is Alex Jones, and he's with us right now on the Loaded Radio Podcast. Alex, how you doing, man? Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I am doing fantastic. I got to tell you, dude, the second studio album, Time to Rise from the Grave, straight up brutality. It's awesome. I love it.
Dude, thank you so much. That means a lot.
Certainly, man. Not a problem at all. Now, who produced the album?
The album was engineered by Scoop Stardaris in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Okay. And it was mastered by Arthur Risk, also in Philly.
Oh, okay. So first time working with these guys?
Second time with Scoops. He engineered our first record too, and but first time working with Arthur for mastering.
Oh, cool. How was that?
It was great. I mean, we've been a fan of Arthur for a while. Like, we love his production. We love his bands. Eternal Champion, War Hungry, like all that stuff. It's great. So the fact that we finally got to work with him in any capacity was something that we were all really looking forward to, and it paid off great.
Just some of the singles I want to bring up. I mean, let's talk about the first single, Rise from the Grave. What can you tell me about that track in particular?
That was kind of like one of, if not the first album or first song to come together for the album. We had finished writing Legions, and we had kind of an idea for what we wanted the general idea of the next album to be. We wanted to be kind of a little bit more streamlined, a little bit more focused than Legions is. And that song came together pretty naturally once we kind of had those building blocks in place. And, obviously, like with so many of our songs, the riff came first. And once we kind of had that lead riff written, everything pretty much just fell into place. And the rest is history, I guess.
Well, is that the case with all of your songs? Like, I mean, Necrobionics was a song I was going to ask you about as well. I love that track, man. That's just a brutal, awesome track.
It depends. Some songs come together lightning fast, like, Rise from the Grave, Human Chandelier. Like, those are the two ones that come to mind immediately. I mean, those songs came together really quick, but other ones like Necrobionics, I mean, that one, once we kind of got it going, it all kind of worked out naturally, but definitely like tempo wise with that one, it had a few different iterations. Like, it was going to be a little bit faster at one point. It was going to be a little like slower at a different point. And once we kind of locked into that groove and realized like how good the riff sounded when we just let it breathe a little bit like that, everything was very easy afterwards.
A song that really, for me at least, takes me back to that classic, I'd say like 90s death metal, would have to be Head Splattered in Seven Ways, dude. I mean, just awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, that if memory serves, was one that was a little bit longer to be constructed, just because there's like so many different elements going on with that song. But yeah, I love that one. That's definitely like a top 3 for me off the record, and we're all super proud of that song.
It's that classic death metal sound. Is that something that like UNDEATH set out to try and achieve, or did it really just come naturally for you guys?
I think it was more of a natural process. We didn't come together and say at the first practice, okay, let's sound like Cannibal Corpse meets Autopsy meets blah, blah, blah. Like, we just,
Right.
we were guys who just kind of vaguely knew each other, and we knew that we kind of had similar interests as far as the metal that we listened to went. And when we came together and started practicing, everything just kind of fell into place, and it's like the big North Star for all of us is obviously like the classic Cannibal, Cryptopsy, etc., Ball Thrower, like all those kinds of bands. But
Sure.
I think also like our individual influences seep into the writing as well. Like Kyle and myself, I mean, we're huge fans of like way more technical stuff like Necrophagist and Spawn of Possession and bands like that,
Cool.
So that element of like the wacky time signatures and the crazy solos and stuff definitely like permeates the writing and the creative process a lot.
Well, I've read in previous interviews that you guys were essentially just, some New York gamers who happen to, just how did you guys come together? How did UNDEATH initially come together?
So yeah, I mean, I have lived in Rochester since I was like 13. So I've been here for a while. I'm almost 30 now. So I've been here for most of my life. Yeah. Kyle moved here from Syracuse, which is nearby, a couple years ago. Matt's from Virginia, and he moved here right around the same time as Kyle did, I think. So we were all like, we had like a cursory awareness of one another. We were all in different bands at the time. So like all of our previous bands had kind of played with each other a little bit, and we like knew of each other a little bit. But Kyle and Matt were the first people to start jamming because Matt had posted a video on his Instagram of him just like practicing double kick, and Kyle was like blown away by how fast he was playing. So Kyle hit him up and asked him if he had any interest in jamming on some death metal, and they got the first batch of songs pretty much written for what would become our first demo. And then I was in a band at the time called Bone Mask, which was very like Neurosis influenced, very like Amon-Ra, but with a little bit of like Entombed, like Wolverine Blues era Entombed thrown in there.
Cool, man. Very cool.
And Kyle saw me at a show, and that inspired him to ask me to come try out for vocals for their band. And that was kind of the genesis of UNDEATH.
You mentioned, of course, Cannibal Corpse, Cryptopsy. Those influences certainly come through. I mean, and I'm sure you've been asked a million times, but I got to ask for our listeners, who are some of the band's major influences?
Sure. Well, I mean, obviously the big ones, Cannibal Corpse is number one, specifically like Corpse Grinder Cannibal Corpse, Kill, Evisceration Plague, Gallery of Suicide, Vile. Those are like albums that we just never, ever get tired of. And it's not like... The first four are amazing too. Like we listen to The Bleeding all the time, but Kill is that's just the best. But yeah, that's number one. A lot of Cryptopsy, None So Vile, and Blasphemy Made Flesh influence. That's huge. Autopsy, specifically Severed Survival. I mean, that album front to back is incredible. Lots and lots of Bolt Thrower. It's got to be like Realm of Chaos, Fourth Crusade, those ones, Loyal, those are like the big three, I'd say. A little bit of Mercenary too. I mean, it's all good. And then
cool, man.
And then beyond that, just like another huge album is Spawn of Possession, Noctambulant. I mean, we listen to that album all the time. It's so sick.
Have you ever met the guys in Corpse? You ever played the same bill with them or anything?
No, I met Alex Webster once. Yeah. Years ago when I was like 18 at like when I saw Cannibal, and I like saw him outside and I like gushed at him, and he like, I'm sure he just filed away in his endless Rolodex of like fans punishing him. But that was the only time in my life I've ever had any interaction with those guys, but I'd love to meet them all someday.
You know what? Alex Webster was probably the nicest guy interview I've ever done in my life.
Really?
That's solid, cool. Dude, man. Yeah. You can really hear that influence with UNDEATH. Not saying that you guys are a clone of that band in any way, but I mean, UNDEATH certainly, it's refreshing to have that old element style of death metal, but brought into a modern day. And I think you guys are doing it just so well, man.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, we try to draw a lot from our influences and pay tribute to the stuff that inspires us, while also kind of like making it our own thing, So it's like, it's a delicate balancing act, and I like to believe that we've gotten pretty confident at it these days.
Yeah. Now, how are you finding working with relatively new member bassist Tommy Wall?
That's great. I mean, Tommy's been in the band since August, September of 2020.
Yep.
So like we're very, very familiar with Tommy at this point, and Jared too. Jared, our other guitarist, joined the band around the same time. So
yep.
They fit in really well, like immediately. You know, we were aware of them as just like really good players, and they kind of got what we were going for like instantly. So it's been smooth sailing.
Of course, the lyrical inspiration, I got to ask, where does that come from?
You know, it's like, it's a lot of the classic stuff. Like, you know, there's a lot of like horror and sci-fi influence there, a lot of fantasy influence. Like Kyle and I are big fantasy nerds. Like we love like the Wheel of Time books and stuff like that. So yeah, that's definitely where a lot of the chief influence comes from. But it's also like, it just depends on what the song needs. You know, if we're writing a song that feels a little bit more sword and sorcery, then we'll write lyrics that you know, service that. If we're writing a song that feels a little bit more like spaced out and sci-fi-ish, then we'll write lyrics like that, you know? So it's kind of it's a trial by fire kind of thing with us, but we like to believe that while we definitely have like a core group of themes that we work with, we don't ever try to like box ourselves into one thing.
Of course, you know, with the new album dropping now, the reviews I've read of it from other people, I mean, they're so positive, man, and people are really embracing the new album. Are you going to be on the road for a while?
Yeah, we leave for our co-headliner with 200 Stab Wounds. We leave for that next week. We're on the road with them for 6 weeks, and then we get back. We have like 3 weeks off, and then we go to the UK, and then we've got a bunch of touring after that has yet to be announced, but we're going to be touring pretty heavily for the immediate future.
Awesome. Alex, thanks so much for taking the time today, man.
Dude, of course. Thank you for having me. Take it easy.
There he is. That's Alex Jones from UNDEATH, and they've got the latest album. Don't forget, it's called It's Time to Rise from the Grave. Came out back in April of this year, and it's brutal, man. If you need brutality, if you like extreme metal, then definitely that's going to be right up your alley. But hey, it's Scott Penfold here with you, and we're now being joined by the lead vocalist for the band OSYRON. They're out of Canada, Calgary, as a matter of fact, Calgary, Alberta. And yeah, they have the new album, Momentous, which is out now. It's a great album, man. It's killer. It's very, I mean, it's not really a classification you can really put these guys into, but just straight up blistering metal. And we got them with us right now, the lead vocalist, Reed Alton, joining us. Reed, thanks for joining us here on the Loaded Radio podcast, man. How you doing?
Yeah, no, happy to be here. Thanks very much.
I want to talk about Momentous, of course, the new album. First off, who produced the new album?
Well, I guess you're talking to 1/5 of the people who produced it. Okay. It was self-produced by the band, but it was mixed in-house by our bassist and multi-instrumentalist extraordinaire, Tyler Corbett. So, okay. Yeah, we do a lot of it in-house, but then we got it mastered by a gentleman named Maor Appelbaum, based out of the States. He's done a lot of pretty kick-ass stuff over the years, so.
I do want to talk about some of the tracks, of course. Tell me about the song Anunnaki. Like, what is that song about, and where did it come from?
Yeah, so Anunnaki stems from the ancient Sumerians and ancient Mesopotamia and their origin story and their gods and deities. It's kind of, paying homage to older religions and history and older cultures because, I guess the main concept of the song was, we have all of our current religions and cultures and societies that we have existing today. But, people 10,000 years ago, they're genetically, not much different than who we are today. We're the same species. We have the same brains. We have the same capabilities. But it's more about kind of saying, why are we erasing or not learning about these past cultures and religions, because they should just be as important as today, because who they were and who we are, it's all what makes us human. And that's kind of what that song is about. It's referring to the ancient Sumerians, it's referring to the Anunnaki and to their origin and belief story, but it really has to do with being human and learning from the past, the present, and then leading into the future.
Another killer tune, man, The Deafening. Tell me about that one. Of course, Stu Block from ANNIHILATOR involved in that one. But first off, tell me about the song itself.
Yeah. Well, I guess it kind of leads into, how Stu got involved. But the song, I guess the main concept, like when we were going through the writing process, I don't know if it was something that the guys, when they were writing the instrumentation or the music or whatever, but the build up and then especially the chorus just really sounded like a combative experience, something that was very, like a one-on-one kind of fight or some kind of, what was it back in the old days where certain cultures would send out their best warrior from each army, and that would sometimes settle the entire argument before there was ever a war, right? So it was kind of that feel to it in the chorus, at least, and that's kind of what I got from it. And so the lyrical concept and kind of what it lent itself to was more of a one-on-one battle with yourself, and kind of looking within, and that voice of doubt, or the many voices that you have in your head that say that you can or you can't, or that you're not good enough or you are good enough, which I guess kind of led us into talking about, what if we had someone featured on this? What if we had another vocalist that maybe was that paradox, or kind of that other side, or that parallel voice that was maybe not in direct correlation lyrically fighting against each other, or like some kind of battle or whatever, but just that duality. And the concept and the idea of Stu came up because it's Stu Block. He's one of the best metal singers in the world right now, and a fellow Canadian at boot. So so we were like, well, let's reach out to him and see what he would think, or if he'd even be down. And luckily for us, he loved the song, he loved the concept, and I think he saw himself being able to contribute and elevate the song. And luckily for us, that's what happened. And what you hear is just mesmerizing, and it's absolutely fantastic. And he's an absolute pro, and he kicked serious ass. So we were super lucky and fortunate, and super honored to have him on the track.
Now, was he actually in studio with you guys, or did send you in his parts, or how did that work?
Yeah, so he recorded his parts in Saskatchewan. He's got a studio and a mixing engineer or a recording engineer that he works with. So we sent the tracks to him. I mean, we had the lyrics and the melody written. So he took the lyrics, and then he took that melody, and he actually took some creative choices and really helped elevate that verse and really made it more of a Stu Block verse. So he did that. But then for the music video, we did actually fly him in to our hometown of Calgary, and which was just a surreal experience. And got to meet him and have some beers and hang out, and and then shoot a kick-ass music video for it. So that was a real treat.
Yeah, definitely. The video is great as you bring that up. It's a really killer video too. Now, looking at the band, there's been such tremendous growth in listenership, streams, and downloads, and even discovery of the band over the last year. Why do you think that is?
I think it's a combination of a few things there, Scott. I think that, first and foremost, as a band, as a unit, I think that we have matured as songwriters and as musicians. So I think that, how we approach the recording process, the writing process, our own individual creative choices versus the band's creative choices, etc. And I think that first and foremost is a huge testament to why we're seeing that, because I think we're really settling in and have really found our niche and our direction as a band and as a genre. But then I think, just us being smarter business-minded people as well, working with smarter PR and taking different creative choices in regards to promotion and, how we're going about our business, why we're making the choices we're making. And we've always believed that we've had a great sound and that we're talented enough. And I'm sure there's a lot of other musicians that feel the same way. But especially for Canadian metal bands, and I'm sure many bands worldwide, it's a lack of getting out there and being heard. Because I feel like once a lot of these bands, because we know it, like in our local scenes and in the areas that we all live, we have these bands and these musicians that we go, holy shit, like, why aren't these guys famous? Or these guys are so talented. Well, they can't break out of their own, market, or out of their own interior market or their own domestic market. And luckily for us, we've worked with some great people over the last year and change, even stemming back to foundations. And I think we're starting to see the benefits from that and the growth, which is really fantastic.
Looking at the band itself as a collective, who would you say some of the major influences of the band? Like people that are just finding out about OSYRON, like what can they expect?
Yeah, actually, it's a good thing you asked this, because we were just on the road. We just did a show out in Vancouver. And we were on the road, and I asked the guys, I said, where do you think it is that we meet in the middle? Like, what band, what artist do you think we meet in the middle? And we really couldn't pinpoint one, because maybe 4 of us would agree on one, but then one of us wouldn't. And then we'd have some that were so far-fetched that no one would say that was a direct influence of them individually. But I'd say that, like, the cool thing with OSYRON and what I've come up with and what I think is kind of the best explanation is that we have all these varying degrees of influences and bands from various genres and various subgenres of metal or whatever. And I think we've just really found a way to bring them in, as we've always tried to do. It's not like this is the first record we've tried to do that, but we've really found a way to bring them all in and then really cohesively glue them into our style. And it's not feeling discombobulated or all over the place or mixed up or whatever. It's really, personally for me, I feel like we've just found a great way to blend them into our own style, and that it sounds more of a cohesive sound. And I think that's where that stems from and why that is what it is. But I think the only band we all agreed upon was maybe Iron Maiden. But even then, like, you know, that's so far from our style. You know what I mean? Like, that's so far from who we are. That's more of just like an earlier influence for a lot of bands anyway, you know? So that was, that's kind of where we're at with our direction and why we came up with the sound that we've had so far.
When it comes to these days, everybody has to classify a certain subgenre of metal. Does OSYRON fall into one of those, or are you guys just making music?
Well, I say we're making music. I say we're making badass heavy metal, but I guess it's I had this debate with a friend of mine over probably too many glasses of wine, and yeah, usually that's how these heavy debates happen. But essentially, we were talking about labels and you know, identification of genres or positions or of occupations or what have you, and you know, and he was like, I don't want one. I don't want to have a label. You know, and I was playing devil's advocate, and I think it was my girlfriend. She just chimed in because I think she was just sick and tired of hearing us banter back and forth for 2 hours. And she said, well, labels aren't for you. They're for everyone else to try and understand what you are, you know? And I think that that's so true, is we don't necessarily pigeonhole or put ourselves into a certain basket of what our genre is. But if someone hears us as something and they say, oh, well, it sounds like progressive metal or progressive symphonic metal or, you know, progressive power metal or symphonic power metal or whatever they all come up with. We've even heard new wave of traditional heavy metal, which I don't hear that at all. But, you know, it's like, you know, if someone comes up with that because that's what it sounds like to them, then that's for them. You know what I mean? It's not for us. And, you know, if someone wants to call us whatever, then we'll be whatever. So I have no answer on to a specific subgenre, but I think we're just writing some kick-ass heavy metal, and we're happy with that right now.
Yeah, you definitely are, man. And I got to say, I think you're the only metal band that I've ever heard cover "Oh Canada," which is pretty badass, man. What prompted that? Yeah,
I mean, other than I guess being patriotic Canucks, sure. And you know, we were in between drummers at the time. If people watch that video, because we have a funny homemade video that we made for that. We don't have Cody in the band yet, so we had parted ways with our previous drummer, and we were looking for something to do, and it was around Canada Day, and we were like, you know, what'd be awesome is if, you know, we just did our own style and our own take on our national anthem, because especially being neighbors to the south, or I guess the northern neighbors to the south, which is the States. You know, there's so many renditions and so many things made of the anthem down there, and it's very celebrated and, you know, all that stuff. And, you know, being Canadians, are like, well, you know, we don't have too many of those, or we don't have a lot of that. And, you know, we're not Christina Aguilera, we're not Fergie, you know, we're not going to necessarily turn it upside down and, you know, more or less ruin it, I guess. But I think that, you know, for us, we were like, well, why don't we just do what we do and have fun with it and pay tribute and honor the anthem for what it is, but have our own spin. And it was an absolute blast to record, an absolute blast to film. And, you know, it's done really well, actually. And it's been played in a few assemblies and a few schools across the country. And
oh, that's great.
It's been in a commercial for a documentary. And it's, you know, it's got a life of its own, and that's what it should be, because it's timeless. It's an anthem. And yeah, we're just happy that we got to do that.
Yeah, man, it's great too. And being a Canadian myself, I thought it was so well done. It was great. Now, what do you got coming up in the days ahead? What's going on with OSYRON in the coming weeks, months, and time ahead?
Yeah, so we've already done a couple shows on our Western Canadian tour. We've hit up some dates in Alberta and BC, and we've got a few more out in Alberta and BC. Actually, we're leaving for a couple shows in a couple of days. Actually, I guess Thursday the 17th. So yeah, we're going to be in Banff, we're going to be in Lethbridge, we're going to be in Cranbrook, British Columbia, and then we're going to be making our way out east all the way to Brandon and Winnipeg, Manitoba. And yeah, we're just going to slowly chip away at Western Canada here. And then I think we're taking a break over most of the winter months and going to come back strong in the spring and summer. And I think we're going to try and get down through the States. And then the goal, obviously, is to get out to Europe because that's where our biggest and fastest growing fan base is right now.
Awesome. Reed, thanks so much for joining me on the show today, man. Really do appreciate your time.
Hey, no, thank you, Scott. It's been a blast, and I appreciate all the good questions. And yeah, if we make it out there towards the center of the universe, then we'll make sure to hit you up, and hopefully you can come out to a show.
I would love to do that, man. I can't wait to see you guys live. It'll be great.
That'd be great. Yeah, all right. Take care, Scott. Thanks so much.
All right, there he is. There's Reed Alton from OSYRON. Check out the new album, Momentous. It's awesome, man. Just a great album, man. But yeah, I'm Scott Penfold. We're going to get on out of here. But again, next week, the Loaded Radio podcast is taking a bit of a change, or rather making a bit of a change, as we're just going to have the way it's built sort of a little bit differently, and it's going to be a little bit more interesting, a lot cooler for you too, okay? So check that out next week on an all-new edition, I guess, not just edition, but an all-new Loaded Radio podcast, okay? Don't forget, check out loadedradio.com for all your hard rock and metal needs when it comes to news, the 24-hour stream, and all that fun stuff. And as well, download the Loaded Radio app. It's completely free, where you can stream previous podcasts and as well as the online radio station and get all your news right to your device, okay? I'm Scott Penfold, and we'll talk to you again next week right here on an all-new Loaded Radio podcast.